How must she have felt? She became close to one of the girls here. It was the one you saved from poisoning today. The woman looked at Maomao apologetically. Is she asking me to look the other way? It seemed the woman hoped to share this sorry tale. She wanted to earn Maomao's sympathy and keep her mouth shut. Thankfully, the commotion had not reached the room where her father and the madam were. If Maomao chose not to say anything, the child would most likely go unpunished. What a pain! She personally felt that if a customer was known to be that much trouble, they should have simply banned him. However, it apparently was the unfortunate courtesan herself who had invited him in. If it became known that there had been an attempted double suicide, this establishment would have quite a headache to deal with. Everyone seemed so grateful to Maomao and her father because, as repugnant as he might be, the man was still the son of an important family. She had saved him from dying. This must have felt like an unbearable injustice to the little servant girl. Maomao thought she could not really blame her. She was at home today. For many months before this, Maomao had not been in the red light district. It was likely that this little girl, who did the shopping and other errands for her house, would know when Maomao's father was home and when he was not. Furthermore, for an emergency such as this, one would typically go to the doctor, not the apothecary. Had the child intentionally chosen a moment when the pharmacist was out, it suggested an impressive quickness of mind for someone so young. That might also explain why she had been slow bringing Maomao's father. It showed how much she hated this man. Finally, Maomao said simply, "I understand," and went back to her father. "Quite a welcome home," her father said lightly. He and Maomao were heading back to their little shack, having spent most of the morning on the incident. Maomao took the coin purse from her father. She checked what was inside, then returned it to him. The amount of money suggested some hush money was included. The notorious customer was in stable condition, but this was likely the last time he would be allowed to visit. Not just this brothel but the entire red light district. Word travelled fast in a place like this. When they got home, Maomao settled in a creaking chair and kicked out her legs. She had never gotten that hot water. She was lucky it wasn't the sweating season, but thanks to all that rushing around she was perspiring anyway, and it felt icky. Almost as uncomfortable was this business about the double suicide. Something about it nagged at her. The man in question was a lowlife. Even the apprentice girl hated him. The others said he mostly looked out for himself. Would a man like that get caught up in a dramatic display of love like a double suicide? Did the courtesan poison him? Perhaps he hadn't chosen to commit suicide at all. But Maomao quickly abandoned the idea. Someone had already tried to poison the man at least once. He would not be quick to eat anything a courtesan offered him. Maomao crossed her arms and grunted to herself. Her father watched her as he crushed some herbs in a mortar. After a moment he said, "Do not say anything based on an assumption." For him to say that suggested he already had an idea about what truly happened. Maomao looked at him ruefully, then slumped against the table. She tried to remember everything that had been at the scene of the incident. Had she missed something? There was a man and a woman collapsed. The scattered tobacco leaves and the glass vessel were notable. Now Maomao realized that unless her memory failed her, there had been only one glass vessel at the scene. She also noticed the wheat stalks. There were 2 different colors of alcohol. Without a word, Maomao got up and stood in front of the water jug. She scooped up some of the mixture, then put it back. Her father watched her do this several times. He sighed and put the powdered ingredients into a container. Then he stood up and shuffled over to stand in front of her. "It is over now," he said. "It is done." He mussed her hair fondly. "I am aware of that," Maomao said, putting the ladle back in the jug one more time and then leaving the house. It was not suicide. It was murder, Maomao thought. She believed the courtesan had tried to kill the man. He was a playboy, a smooth talker, a lover who often left women behind. The courtesan he had been courting, the most recent target of his amorous advances, might be the one who tried to kill him. Maomao felt safe supposing that the philanderer had, as usual, promised this woman he would buy her out of her contract. Unlike Maomao, many people believed that love could change a person. When enough people repeated an idea enough times, it became the truth. Very well. How then had the courtesan managed to poison the vigilant man? It was simple. She just showed him that no poison was present. The courtesan would taste the wine first. It was just the sort of thing Maomao did in her job. When the man saw that the woman was perfectly fine, he would drink the same wine. That was why there had been only one container. However, this raised the possibility that the woman would succumb to the poison before the man drank the tainted wine. Some poisons, like the one Maomao discovered at the banquet, were slow-acting. There was probably one of those present too. In this case, the agent was most likely the tobacco. It had a stimulant effect when chewed and was spat out quickly. If the courtesan was a talented actress and could consume the poison without being discovered, that was good. But Maomao suspected she had received help. She drank the wine through a straw made from a wheat stalk. This was a perfectly normal thing to do, and it wouldn't have aroused the man's suspicion. How had this enabled her to avoid the poison? Maomao thought it had something to do with the wine itself. There were two different types of wine. They were two colors in a single transparent glass vessel. The wines might not be as immiscible as oil and water, but they would have slightly different densities. If you poured a lighter wine on top of a heavier one carefully enough, two layers would form. And it would be quite pretty, a wine of two colors in a glass container, a lovely little trick to please a favored guest. While the man drank from the top without a straw, the courtesan would use her straw to drink only from the lower layer. Once she was sure the man had collapsed, she would drink a bit of the poisoned wine herself. It wasn't enough to cause death, only enough to create a convincing illusion. The scattered tobacco leaves would help mask the scent and lead people to believe they were used in the act. If the courtesan herself had died, everything would have been wasted. She had worked very hard to make sure the man succumbed, and she survived. This presumably also explained why she had chosen to do this first thing in the morning. There was even someone to conveniently discover the situation for her. Maomao arrived at the brothel that morning. She went around back to the room where the poisoned courtesan had been put to rest. She found the exhausted-looking woman leaning against a railing and gazing up at the sky. It appeared she was up and about. She was humming a children's song, and an ephemeral smile floated across her face. Fleeting and yet, Maomao thought, somehow dauntless. "Sister, what are you doing?" A servant girl, not the child from that morning, called when she saw the courtesan leaning on the railing. She dragged the woman back into her room and closed the window. The behavior of the first servant girl, the one who had tried to stab the man, struck Maomao as odd. It seemed strange for someone whose beloved sister was at risk of dying of poison. She had deliberately gone to the apothecary and not the doctor, hoping it would be too late to save the man. She also took her time summoning Maomao's father. Was she not worried about the courtesan at all, or did she not believe a second person so close to her could die as well? Was Maomao overthinking things, or did it almost seem the girl had known all along that the courtesan would make it through? Then there was the other courtesan, who had so emotionally described the woman's plight to Maomao, and also the uncommonly generous madam. The more she thought about it, the stranger everything seemed. No assumptions, huh? Maomao looked slowly from the newly closed window up to the sky. She was finally back in the red light district. She had pined for this place all those months in the rear palace, but deep down they were the same place. Both were gardens and cages. Everyone within them was trapped, being poisoned by the atmosphere. The courtesans absorbed the toxins surrounding them until they themselves became a sweet poison. With the playboy son still alive, it was difficult to say what would happen to his would-be killer. He might suspect someone tried to poison him. However, the brothel might also accuse him of ruining one of their important products. They might try to get something from him that way. It does not matter which, Maomao thought. It had nothing to do with her. If you felt personally involved in everything that happened in this place, you would never survive. Maomao gave the back of her head a tired scratch. Then she decided to go over to the verdigris house. She was going to get that hot water. She set off at a slow trot. Chapter 24, A Misunderstanding. Maomao's 3 days at home went by quickly. It was painful to leave after becoming reacquainted with so many familiar faces, but she could not abandon her work at the rear palace. It was not least because of the trouble it would cause for Lihaku, who had vouched for her. The final push came from the madam of the verdigris house. She was even now trying to pick the perfect sadist to be Maomao's first customer. I will just pretend I had a very pleasant dream. When she saw the slick Pairin and Lehaku, who resembled a pile of melting honey, Maomao thought perhaps she had paid too rich a reward. The next place Lehaku would visit for pleasure was already decided. Having tasted the nectar of heaven, he could never again be satisfied with the tepid offerings of earth. Maomao felt a little bad for him. She was sure the madam would take him for all he was worth, but that wasn't Maomao's problem, so she returned to the Jade Pavilion bearing gifts. There she discovered a nymph-like young man who seemed quite on edge. She sensed something toxic just beyond his delicate smile. Why did he seem to be glaring at her? He was certainly beautiful, regardless of his personality. The glare he fixed on her felt a little intimidating. Maomao ducked her head, hoping to avoid dealing with him. She tried to head straight for her room, but he got a firm grip on her shoulder. She felt his nails dig into her flesh. I will be waiting in the sitting area, he said, his voice like honey in her ear. It was wolfsbane honey, though, poisonous honey. Behind him, Gaoshan was urging Maomao with his eyes not to fight it. She saw Gyokaiu too, whose eyes were sparkling even though she seemed a bit troubled. Finally, Hongyang looked at Maomao with what she thought was reproach. The other three ladies in waiting looked on with more curiosity than concern. She expected to be well and truly interrogated after this was over, whatever this was. Maomao set down her baggage, changed into her uniform and went to the sitting area. You asked for me, sir. Jinchi was alone in the room. He was dressed in a simple official's uniform, and he wore it well. He was seated in a chair with his legs crossed, resting his elbows on the table before him. To Maomao's eyes, he appeared to be in a worse mood than usual. Perhaps it was simply her imagination. She hoped it was just her imagination. Yes, that is what she would believe, it was her imagination. Jinchi's usual sedative Gaoshan was not to be seen, neither was consort Gyokaiu, and that made the situation unbearable for Maomao. I see you had a little visit home, Jinchi began. Yes, sir, and how was it? Everyone seemed to be in good health and good spirits. That is what matters. Oh, indeed, yes, sir. Jinchi said nothing further, so neither did Maomao. It was clear they weren't going to have much of a conversation at this rate. Finally Jinchi prodded this Lehaku. What kind of a man is he, sir? He vouched for me to leave the palace. How does Jinchi know his name? Maomao wondered. Lehaku would become a regular customer. He would be a major source of revenue. He was a very important person indeed. Do you know what it means? Do you understand? Jinchi said, and irritation was plain in his voice. There was none of his usual sweetness. Of course. One must be a high official with an impeccable background in order to vouch for another. Jinchi looked absolutely taxed by this response. It was as if he was enervated by the statement of the obvious. Did he give you a hair stick? He gave it to me and quite a few others. He was giving them to every girl he could see. It seemed he felt he had to do so. Despite his intimidating appearance, Lehaku could be quite generous. The design of his accessory was clean and simple. However, the workmanship was solid, and it was a quite lovely piece overall. If Maomao ever lacked money, she could probably sell it for a decent price. You are telling me I lost to that? Was I bested by a bauble some hack felt obliged to give you? Wow, I have never heard him talk like that, Maomao thought. She was puzzled by Jinchi's unfamiliar tone. It was clear that something was wrong. Jinchi continued, I gave you a hair stick as I recall, but I didn't see hide nor hair of you when you needed someone to vouch for you. He looked positively sullen. His alluring smile had been replaced by the pout of a petulant boy, and suddenly he looked hardly older than Maomao. Perhaps she was even younger. Maomao marveled at how a single change of facial expression could alter a person's appearance so drastically. She understood this much. Jinchi was displeased that she had leaned on Lehaku for help rather than coming to him. Maomao could not say it made sense to her. Why would he want one more thing on his to-do list? Wouldn't his life be easier without it? Or was it having so much time on his hands that made Jinchi so eager to get involved, even when it might be inconvenient for him? My sincere apologies, Maomao said. I couldn't think of compensation that would be worthy of you, Master Jinchi. It would have been rude to give a eunuch an invitation to a brothel, right? Perhaps if it had been one of those innocuous places where the ladies only served tea and played music for the entertainment of the guests. But Maomao knew very well that wasn't everything that happened at the Verdigris house. She hesitated to invite a man who was no longer entirely a man to come there. Furthermore, she had to consider who Jinchi was. Maomao could easily imagine the average courtesan falling completely under his spell. She was sure she would have caught hell from the madam for introducing him to her ladies. Compensation? What does that supposed to mean? Did you pay this Lehaku? He looked deeply disturbed. A touch of insecurity was now added to his overall ill humor. Yes. I offered him the pleasure of a night's dream. She added privately that she did not think he would return to reality for a while. A man like Lehaku might be a lion with his troops, but he was probably a kitten in the hands of Perrin. And folk belief held that a cat well cared for might bring its master luck or money. Maomao looked at Jinchi and realized the blood had drained from his face. His hand, clutching a teacup, was shaking. Maybe he is feeling cold. Maomao turned to heap a few more pieces of charcoal on the brazier and fanned the flames gently. He seemed entirely pleased, she reported. It makes me feel all the hard work I did for him was worth it. And now I will have to work hard to find more new customers. Maomao clenched her fist to demonstrate her private determination. From behind her she heard a teacup shatter. "Whatever are you doing?" she asked. Bits of ceramic were scattered on the floor. Jinchi was standing there, his face absolutely pale. Tea stained his neat uniform. "Oh, I will grab something to wipe up with," Maomao said. But when she opened the door she discovered Consort Jayukayu clutching her stomach with laughter. Gaeshan was there as well and he seemed exhausted. Then there was Hongyang, who looked at Maomao with an expression of pure exasperation. She did not need to say anything more. Maomao looked at them baffled. Without a word, Hongyang walked over to her and smacked her on the back of the head. The chief lady-in-waiting was quick to react. Maomao rubbed her head, still not fully understanding what was happening, but she went to the kitchen to get a rag anyway. Gaeshan asked, thinking this would be a great deal of trouble, "How long can we expect you to sulk?" Even after they returned to his office, Jinchi refused to do anything but lie slumped across his desk. Gaeshan heaved a sigh. "Must I remind you that you are supposed to be at work?" The desk, so recently and with such effort cleared off, was already piled with new papers to attend to. "I know that." He hated work. Jinchi would not have normally said something so childish. He did not usually become very attached to his toys. After Jinchi spoke with Maomao, Gaeshan carefully asked Consort Jayukayu for more information. The consort explained that the payment for Maomao's guarantor was a meeting with a famous courtesan. Gaeshan had never thought a girl like Maomao might have such connections. So what had his master been imagining exactly? Ah, the terrors of youth, the withered 30-something mused. Jinchi had calmed down considerably since then, but his bad mood remained. He had powered through his work and rushed off to find Maomao. He discovered she had gone back to her home with a man he did not know. It must have surprised him completely. Gaeshan thought that was unfortunate, but he could not spend all his time calming the outbursts of an overgrown child. Finally, Jinchi began to apply his chop to the pile of papers. If he judged a paper was one he could not approve at a glance, he set it to one side on his desk. No sooner had he gone through the pile than an under-official arrived with a new armload. Jinchi could stand to ponder some of the papers just a little longer, Gaeshan thought while watching his master work. Many of the proposals came from officials. Their ideas would benefit only themselves. Gaeshan lamented that the young master's workload should increase for such a sordid reason. Before he knew it, the sun was going down. Gaeshan lit the lamp. "Pardon me, sirs." Gaeshan saw a subordinate approaching and moved to intercept him. "We are done working for the day," he said. "Perhaps you would be so kind as to come by tomorrow." "Oh, it is not a business matter, sir," the man said with a hurried wave of his hand. In fact, and then, furrowing his brow, the messenger related a most urgent situation. Chapter 25. Wine. What terrible news, Consort Jayukayu said, her face darkening. Standing before her, Jinchi's heavenly countenance was also troubled. Someone important must be dead. Maomao was there as well, but she simply observed, feeling little of the emotion of the moment. It might have seemed cold, but she wasn't sentimental enough to feel sympathy for someone whose name she had never heard and whose face she had never seen. The deceased was more than 50 years of age. The cause of death was drinking too much. You reap what you sow, that was all there was to it, or it should have been. Even after completing her food-tasting duties, Maomao could not leave the room. Jinshi had sent Hongniang on an errand, and as a result Maomao had to stay. A eunuch could not be alone with a royal consort, so a lady-in-waiting had to be present. The important thing was that Jinshi had given the task to Hongniang, not to her attendant Maomao. He is plotting something, Maomao thought.